Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal, Dahiya, and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues. Today, we're going to talk about the presidential election 2022. Now, polling for the presidential election was held at the Parliament House in New Delhi and state legislative assemblies on Monday. MPs and MLAs cast their votes to elect the 15th President of India. NDA's nominee for the post of President is Draupadi Murmu, a tribal leader, former governor of Odisha, and a two-term former MLA. Opposition has fielded Yashwant Sinha, a veteran politician and former cabinet minister as well. The counting of votes will take place at Parliament House on 21st of July, and the next president will take oath on 25th of July. So in today's episode, we'll discuss and analyze all aspects of this crucial presidential election and its significance as well. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests. Let me first introduce them to you. Beginning with, we have with us in the studio Mr. K.V. Prasad, senior journalist. We are also joined by Mr. Chakshu, head of the outreach at PRS. And we also have with us Mr. Ashok Tandon, another senior journalist who is joining us. Welcome, all of you gentlemen, to Sansad Television. I'll begin with you, Mr. Prasad, since, just like Mr. Tandon, you would have also seen a lot of presidential elections. Let's begin with the obvious question. What's different and what's significant about this one?
Well, I think in terms of difference is the question of candidates. Every time the candidate changes, that's the basic difference I would come up straight at. But the rest of the process remains the same. We have the principal formations, that means the governing party and its coalition partners who have fielded the candidate becomes the official candidate. And of course, you have the opposition which has its own candidate. In this case, of course, for the first time, we are seeing that a tribal woman is set to enter the Rashtrapati Bhavan as the next president of India. So that, I think, is the most significant thing on this elections. So I think that's where it looks like. But rest of it, if you look at down the memory lane, Mr. Tandon has done far more than he has been my boss and senior. So I think, having said that, the only election which didn't have an election in the sense of a contest was the one in which Mr. Neelam Sanjeev Reddy won in 19. When there was no contestant at all.
Indeed. Let me bring in Mr. Tandon here as well, since you mentioned about Mr. Tandon. Mr. Tandon, welcome to Sansad Television. In terms of what is different for this particular election, this particular presidential election, of course, we're talking about in terms of candidates, and as Mr. Prasad was referring to it, how do you look at it?
First of all, let's forget for a moment what is different in this election. The real question is that it is a historic moment in the successful functioning of Indian democracy. Indian Republic is at work today. The whole world will be watching a largest democracy in the world and also a republic, electing its head of state. A new generation may not even be knowing that India is a republic which elects its head of state on its own through its elected members. So the elected members who are elected directly or indirectly by the people are today, they were electing a head of state of this government. And that is, the real question that Indian democracy is at work, a successful parliamentary democracy and also a republic is at work. So from the point of view of Indian democracy, it is a historic moment. And the other important aspect of this is that in the presidential election, there is no whip. All the electoral college members are free to cast their vote with a conscious voice. And that is exactly what witnessed today. A large number of, I will not even use the word cross-voting, because when members cutting across party lines, they vote for the candidate they like most, was visible today, and that is not cross-voting. So that was another aspect, and that was largely because of the candidate of the NDA. The first time, as Prasad said, a tribal leader, a woman, downtrodden, representing in the Antyodaya's term, the last person standing in the queue in the Indian society, is now going to occupy highest place in Indian Republic. So these are something which are different. There have been so many elections. There have been some election contested very keenly also. And in this case, although the outcome is well known, she's going to get more than 60% of votes. But this scene today, the scene in the legislative assemblies, in Parliament House today was like festival of democracy at work. Elected members coming out, casting their votes throughout the country. And that was visible all over the country and even in the world through television. And that was a remarkable thing, which I think needs to be pointed out.
Okay, indeed, that is a very remarkable aspect there, and that brings me to Chakshu here. Let's try and sum up, this entire process as well for our viewers, Chakshu, as two aspects which have been pointed out by Mr. Tandon and which are very clearly known to everyone as well. One is the electoral college for election to the post of president, and second is the fact that there is no party whip.
Correct. Let's step, Vishal, let's step a little bit back. When we were framing our constitution, the Constituent Assembly went through two thought processes as to how we should elect the president. An initial thought process was that maybe the president should be popularly elected, which means that you and I vote in that election and elect the president. Then we decided to, go with the Westminster model of parliamentary democracy, where a popularly elected government is responsible to the legislature. And in that system, then we decided that a popularly elected president might not fit in. So then the constitution framers came up with a system of an electoral college where you and I would elect a our representative, and that representative would then go ahead and vote for the president. It's interesting as to how, if we look at developments in our neighborhood, there's a nation which is in turmoil, economic and political. The political leadership has to flee from there, and roughly at the same time, we are peacefully electing our president. It's also interesting as to how many of our presidents, in fact, almost all of our presidents, have had some connection to the legislature. Our current president has been a member of the Rajya Sabha. Both the candidates in this election have had a connection with either the state legislature or the national legislature. And in our constitution, the president and the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha combine together to make the legislature.
Indeed.
So I think it's, as Mr. Prasad pointed out, everything's the same in terms of process. But when you look at candidates, when you look at circumstances, when you look at how things are happening across the world, every presidential election throws up this interesting color of things that comes to the election process.
Okay. Mr. Prasad, on the process itself, how do you think it sets apart, the Indian democratic system or the process, the electoral process which we've adopted from the other democracies, as well as, Chakshu was also pointing out, because that's also significant for the younger generation, as Mr. Tandon was referring to, for them to understand that this is the legacy which we've been following, and this is something which has withstood the test of times as well.
Yeah, of course, as was pointed out by Chakshu and Tandon Sahab also, the fact remains that the decision was done in the Constituent Assembly to have a electoral college, indirect election, so to say, where you have an electoral college both for the President of India and Vice President of India. The debates will actually reflect what was the context in which it was taken up, which has been just summarized here. The question is, this helps you to the head of the state and the head of the republic and the head of the popular government. So these are the two very distinct power structures that are clear. The head of the state becomes the head of the constitution. The repository of supporting everything that the Constitution of India means starts from the President of India. In fact, you wouldn't be surprised, many years ago, even appointment in one of the lowest cadres in the government would say appointment by the President of India or at the authority of the President of India. So such is the authority. And also by the very fact that he is head of parliament, by being and also the commander-in-chief of the Indian Defence Forces. So these are very clearly laid structures in the constitution, this just being a primer. So there's nothing much in the process. The process was well established. It has been followed time and time again. We are probably the 16th time we are having an election. One or two we had early because of the unfortunate demise of the incumbent presidents. But otherwise, it has been tenure to tenure, and the end of the tenure, as we are seeing now, when Mr. Kovind's tenure comes to an end in a few days from now, by then the country would have elected a new president who would then take oath of office, I think the function...
On 25th.
On the 25th, and it will be in the Central Hall of Parliament. That is a convention. So this has been a time-honored tradition. which has been followed. And I think that's what's going to be seen this time too.
Okay. Let's now shift focus back to the two candidates here, and Mr. Tandon, I'd like to start with you in terms of what does the choice of candidates by both the government and the opposition suggest. And it's not just about this election. We've seen in the previous elections as well. Both sides try to convey or send some message across. So what is it that both sides are trying to convey this time around?
A very interesting message was conveyed by none other than Trinamool Congress Chief Minister of West Bengal, Mamata Banerjee. After NDA announced Draupadi Murmu, her comment was, had we known it earlier, perhaps we would have thought of supporting her also. Now, she was the person who, in fact, floated the name of Yashwant Sinha and tried to evolve a consensus among the opposition parties in Mr. Yashwant Sinha's favor. But after Draupadi Murmu was nominated, even she was having a second thought. And then later on, we saw one by one, so many parties also had a second thought, and they came around and started supporting Draupadi Murmu. So this is a message, I think, which the NDA conveyed in the very first instance. And another mistake I would say the opposition committed was not to wait for the the ruling party candidate to be announced first. And they, in a hurry, announced Mr. Yashwant Sinha's candidature. So the message which NDA has tried to convey is Mr. Modi's mantra, or Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas and Sabka Vishwas. That means he is concentrating mainly on the poor, downtrodden, backward, and all deprived sections of the society. But imagine the tribal belt in India, the poor in India, the villagers in India, when they will see Draupadi Murmu taking salute at the Republic Day parade, they will certainly realize that they are enjoying the fruits of independence. Okay. And that is the message which has been tried to be sent across to people, that India belongs to everybody. India belongs to the lower section of the society also, and a woman. And that is a message, and that was one of the reasons why so many parties later on had a second thought, and they came around and started supporting her. So the message, I think, which perhaps opposition could not convey was that we are feeling Mr. Yashwant Sinha to counter NDA through united opposition. So the opposition was not united at the end of the day. So where was the idea of floating, or in a hurry floating Mr. Yashwant Sinha? Opposition should have waited for the NDA candidate to be announced. Then most of the parties, even I hear that there have been murmurs in the Congress party also. And there are reports today, or rather allegations, large-scale cross-voting by the Congress party MLAs in different parts of the state and country. So that shows the choice of the NDA, in fact, overweight. And that was, in a way, a defeat of the opposition. Whatever is the result, outcome is very clear. But I think on this particular front, opposition failed to put up a united front, and also the divisions are very clear during the polling today.
Okay. Mr. Prasad, your views there. Do you agree with this aspect that although this is a constitutional post, and the President of India, as all of us know, you were also pointing out, is the head of state, head of the republic, head of all the constitutional authorities there. But every time, in every election, we've seen that political rivals on both sides try to send a message across through the choice of their nominee.
Well, I think that's what been attempted by the opposition in this thing. I think what happened is they probably can be described as jump the gun. They came up with their name much ahead, even before the ruling coalition or the governing coalition came up with its candidate. And then, as Mr. Tandon pointed out, you had the Trinamool Congress coming up with a statement. Then you had Jharkhand. They had the political compulsions, and probably because of the candidate, by the force of candidate, they had to change the position. Shiv Sena, for instance, or several other parties in UP. So, but the opposition did try to say a message, which Mr. Yashwant Sinha kept on telling in his campaign, that he was here for an alternate vision that the opposition is wanting to convey, the larger what they perceive to be threats that the Indian democracy and Indian democratic polity is facing. So that is the message that he was trying to deliver on behalf of what the opposition wanted to say. Is it successful? Surely you can see the results will tell you, but by all accounts we know that Draupadi Murmu's candidature was very strong. Apart from the electoral math being in her favor, the mood itself changed after her name. There was, and in fact you had some people appealing that a tribal woman, so people across community, people from the community, members of parliament or legislatures should forget about party affiliations and then back her. So that messaging which was probably was, as Mr. Tandon put out, the opposition wanted to send of opposition, I think they were testing the waters for 2024, is what my perspective is, which probably is not working right now.
Okay. Chakshu, your thoughts there on the choice of candidates. And since we're talking about this election, of course, we would want to understand your views on the candidature of Draupadi Murmu and Yashwant Sinha as well. But if we take a look back into the past, and the choice of candidates every time does tend to send some sort of message across. Be it, if you look at, Abdul Kalam's candidacy way back, and then followed by other presidents as well, and before him also.
Vishal, it's interesting as to, when we talk about candidates, India, when we became independent, women got the right to vote the same time as men. Many other mature democracies took time to elect or to give women the franchise to vote in elections. We as a country now have had women at every senior political position, constitutional positions. We've had 2 women speakers, we've had a woman prime minister, we've had 1 woman president, and if the way voting's going, we possibly will have the 2nd woman president. So I think that shows about choice of candidates by political parties. I think political parties, the other thing that they try to do is field a candidate which will transcend political differences. You mentioned Dr. Kalam, a complete outsider to the political system, but he was able to transcend that difference between the ruling coalition and the opposition, and to the extent that the principal opposition party did not have a candidate. So these are interesting things as to what political parties are able to do. One last thought when it comes to the candidature chosen by political parties. I don't think, or at least I believe that in any election, there will be a winner and there will be a person who will not succeed to the office. But it is interesting historically to note that people who've come up and stood up for these elections, they have made immense contributions irrespective of what the outcome of the election has been. And one of their contributions possibly is the fact that they offered themselves to stand as an opposing candidate for the highest office in the country.
Okay. Indeed, there has to be an opposition for an election to happen out there, opposing candidate. That's something which we are witnessing. Mr. Tandon, I'd like to bring you in here. And if we have to take a holistic look at, of course, we've spoken about candidacy, the process itself. Let's talk about, the office of the president, the significance, the importance, and the way it defines the Indian democracy.
When we got independence, and for some time, when we were members of the Commonwealth, Queen of England was the head of Indian Republic also. No, sorry, when we had not become Republic at that time. So when the people in India know the tribal, the Harijans and, Adivasi, they all, when they will learn that President of India now, Draupadi Murmu, is some way equivalent to the Queen of England. Now that will raise the head high that here is a country which is now independent, can elect a tribal woman as head of the state, and she will be the commander-in-chief of Indian Armed Forces. She will be, head of the state, will be taking salute at the Republic Day parade and representing India abroad on all ceremonial occasions. So that will show that, well, in India, it is people's democracy, success of people's democracy, and representation is being given to all sections of the society. So the office of the president is, of course, constitutional head, a titular head as we call it, but the president is, governed by the advice of the Council of Ministers. That is all there. But the fact remains, in an Indian republic, the head of the state is a woman, a tribal woman for the first time. And that will send a word, I think, a message across the world that Indian democracy is now mature and they do care for all sections of the society, that the government of the day is not just having lip sympathy for the downtrodden and the backward and the deprived section, but they are actually really translating it into reality by appointing people from these sections to highest positions. And that, of course, would be also witnessed when Mr. Dhankar becomes the Vice President of India. He also represents the backward classes. So that kind of message being sent across by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his government is loud and clear. And I think that is what the whole world will be watching about Indian democracy. And there was a time when one family rule was being perpetuated in India, and there was a perception abroad that Indian democracy is a ramshackle democracy. Only one family rule, one party rule. Now there is change of parties in the election. People are changing the party, and now it is a multi-party system. We are a federal republic, and it is successful also. There is, cooperative federalism in India is successful, and the festival of democracy, as I
A quick concluding comments from both of you, Mr. Prasad and Chakshu, both of you. In terms of this issue of significance of the post of president itself, as Mr. Tandon was beautifully describing, how it conveys the message. Mr. Prasad?
Well, I think the message is very much the office does on a daily basis. I mean, as a protector of the Constitution, everything that is upheld in the name of the President is the Constitution of India. And so everything that is decided is in the name of the office of the President. So a bill will not become a law, even passed by both parliaments, till the President of India gives an assent to it. So I think the duties are very clearly laid. It's a wide range of activities that the President of India does on a daily basis, some of which comes very much in the public domain, plus the larger image of the public.
Okay. Chakshu?
Vishal, I think the President of India is supposed to inspire the country. The oath of the President says to defend the Constitution. I think for me, those two stand as one of the most significant aspects of what the office of the President conveys to the rest of us.
Okay. So there it is. Thank you so much, Chakshu, Mr. Prasad as well, and Mr. Tandon for sharing your views and insights. As our experts were pointing out, clearly the importance and significance of the presidential election, the process itself, and the significance of the post of the President of India. Now, the counting of votes for this election will take place on 21st of July, and the new President will be sworn in on 25th of July. We'll come back again with all the details and some other different topics as well. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.